Welcome everybody to our next session for today. It's my pleasure again to introduce yet another colleague from the University of Sydney, Dr. Ella Collins-White. And Ella's going to take us on a 55-minute workshop leveraging narratives for systemic change. Ella, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. You may notice, just before I introduce myself, I'll say I did have the Google Slides up here before. So if anybody would like to follow along at their own pace on the slides, I just uploaded that, so it should all work. There isn't too many links or anything like that, but there are some slides that have a lot of text, which is also why I've got the printouts on the table of the 2 slides that have the most text. So you can refer back to it as well, or use the Google Slides, whichever one you would like. Okay, I'll go back to the previous slide if everybody's ready. Okay. Okay, so now I have another mentee, sorry. I just wanted to get started by saying thank you for everybody being here today. I do acknowledge that maybe we're all feeling at different levels of energy today, coming with different experiences to this workshop. So if you would like to let us know how you're feeling, it just gives us a sense of what's going on in the room, how everybody's energy levels are. You know, whether you're really enthusiastic or maybe it's the second session that you've been to and you're feeling a bit tired, waiting for that second coffee to hit. Yeah, it's just a way of like connecting everybody in the room. So how do you feel today? Let us know. Looking at how everybody's feeling today, we've got lots of things happening. So while people are filling that in, I'll just introduce myself. As Sarah said, I'm Ella. I'm from the University of Sydney. And I work in educational innovation. There are a few of my colleagues here today. We just heard from Kriya, Sarah who introduced me, Sam over here, and Kimberly as well. So we're all come down from Sydney just for the day. I'm a relatively tall person, I think, with brown hair and a kind of pale, freckly complexion. I'm wearing a black dress with some florals on it and a skivvy because it's a bit cold today because, you know, coming from Sydney, I'm always afraid of the Melbourne weather. And we're just checking in with how everybody's feeling today. So I can see lots of people are excited, feeling inspired, curious, energized, still waking up, interested, cozy. Yeah, it is quite warm in here. I'm kind of regretting this choice of my extra skivvy now. Waiting for that coffee to hit, happy, caffeinated, motivated, bloated, cold, tired. So we've really got the range of emotions happening here today in the classrooms. I did want to acknowledge and pay respects to the First Nation people, both of this country that we're on today, and of the people of that are the traditional owners of the country on which Sydney University stands, which are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Oh, too far. There we go. And I think it's really important to always keep in the forefront of our minds that as we're sharing our own knowledge, teaching, learning and research practices within this space, may we also pay respect to knowledge embedded forever within the custodianship of country. And I think I like to keep both of these countries in mind because we're obviously here sharing this space, but we're also thinking about work that's been done in our own campus at Sydney University. So that's why I wanted to acknowledge the Gadigal as well. All right. So what are we looking for today? So these are the sort of key steps that I'm thinking through in this 55 minutes workshop. So beginning with why think about creating a case study, because this talk is about how can we leverage narratives for systemic change? How do we actually create a case study? So why? How, and then some time to think about your experiences and what might be fit for a good case study for your context. Then some time to work with the participants on your table. So if you're sitting by yourself, you might like to join a table, or maybe you'd like to work individually. That's totally okay as well. And then the last option here, I'm hoping to leave some time for any very brave participants who would like to come and pitch their case study that they're thinking about writing to the room for feedback. So that is totally optional. But if we have anybody who's really like, yeah, I'm ready, let's do it, we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear what stories you kind of have going on in your context as well. Yeah, so any questions before I move on to the next slide? Okay, so beginning with why create a case study. So there's a few different things going on in this slide. This is the lovely picture from our strategy. You can see how much diversity we have at Sydney University. So I didn't like just take some pictures of people, it's from our strategy. So to begin with, thinking about barriers to UDL implementation, in our context are often discussed as a lack of confidence in UDL, a misunderstanding of impact of UDL, and time constraints and perceived complexity of implementing UDL. So those are the things that we hear from colleagues. It might be the things that you hear from colleagues if you are a UDL champion in your space. And the kind of key, like this is a key piece of feedback from this particular reading, Hills by Overend and Hildebrandt. And this is something that we kind of hear echoed in our context, and you might also hear echoed in yours. I think that when people feel busy, they are reluctant to change because change takes thought and effort. With more understanding of some of the techniques that can be used in UDL and even relatively small changes that can have a big effect or impact. And I think that's the real core message that we try to get through in our case studies, is thinking about what are real people in our context already doing? What are real people trying to change or implement in their context? And how can we share this with other colleagues across campus? Because we know that colleague to colleague, peer to peer, hearing from each other is what really changes people's minds and gets people to think more creatively about how they can impact and change their context. All right, so that's my why create a case study. I'm sure you've probably already thought about all of these, but I think it's really important to keep that in the forefront of your mind. Why are we doing this? What's the point of it? All right, so in creating a case study, how do we do this? These are the kind of core steps that we think through in our context. And I have embedded this in our framework of designing for diversity because that's at the core of what a lot of our practices at Sydney University and at educational innovation. I've broken down this framework into different sections. So if you'd like to look at it in its entirety, that is what the printout is on the table. I also have more printouts here if you would like that. But I'm just going to break it down and go through it, and then you'll see it all together. Okay, so to begin thinking about a case study, the first thing is to think about establishing the background or context. Who are our learners? What are their challenges, goals, and barriers? So these are the first 3 steps of designing for diversity. Thinking through these allows us to kind of frame that, think about who we are actually trying to speak to. And the learners can kind of change as well. It could be the students in the classroom, or it might also be the academic colleagues that we might be talking to. So that's sort of where we begin with those 3 steps. And then next, thinking about the process. So what's the process behind the case study or behind the story that we're exploring and trying to share amongst our campus? So how did we explore these barriers? How did we unpack them? What data, knowledge, or experience did we draw on? What changes and solutions did we use in this context? So thinking about what is the change that we're kind of exploring here. And that's the second point also on the sheet, if you'd like to have a look at that. And then the kind of last phase of it in mapping out a case study, thinking about how we can unpack those different things, is describe the outcome and impact. So what impact did these changes have? How did it support, challenge, or innovate our learning environment in ways that support our learners? What are our contexts, the next steps, and how can we elevate and iterate? So those are evaluate and iterate. Those are the kind of core things that we're looking for as the outcome or the end product from our case study. And so this is kind of a scaffold that I use to map out a case study. The different creative ways that you might tell this story can obviously change depending on context, depending on whether you're pitching this at, you know, higher ups or colleagues or students or, you know, other people outside the university. But these are the kind of core elements that I think about when I think about how to create a case study. What are the key things that we want to be telling? So to make this a little bit clearer, I do have a brief example of how I am going about creating a case study currently. And then I'll hand it over to you to have a go. But before I continue, does anyone have any questions? Sorry, I know it's all pretty like basic, but please, if I'm not being clear or have kind of slipped over something, please let me know. All right. All right, and that's just the whole framework, which is what you have printed on the table. So it's what we've already gone through. It's just putting it all together there for you so you can see it as a complete piece. All right, so the case study I want to talk about today is one that Sarah and I have been working on with a few of our academic colleagues. And basically, this has been an innovation in teaching where we rethought about how we taught an exercise science subject to incorporate student tutors in the classroom and to also have only one tutor per tutorial, which is quite rare when you have a really big subject. Normally people are teaching 3 or 4 tutorials. And the goal here was to make first year students feel like they were seen, like they belonged in the classroom and were connected to their cohort. So we hypothesized that by having one tutor connected to one group of students, that would make students feel like they were seen and supported in a way that they might not in a larger cohort or context. And also by having a student tutor, that would support them to have a peer-to-peer learning experience in that first semester. So we think about breaking that down. What is the background and context? Learners, first year students in exercise science, what are the goals to foster belonging and connection to their course, the university, and to their peers, teachers, and community? And the barriers, being new to university, unsure what to expect or how to succeed. So those are the core things that we were looking at. And then the process. So I've just written out like my ideas for it. So drawing on the expertise of unit coordinators who had taught the unit before, we challenged our assumptions about what students needed by partnering with past students to reshape the teaching material for the course. Together, the students and teachers worked on identifying pain points throughout the semester, reimagining how their challenges might be met. So I thought that was a pretty good first draft, but then revisiting my own goal for this project, I actually thought maybe I was shifting away from some of the things that I had identified as the goal and the barrier, which were belonging. In the context here, I began to talk about succeeding in terms of academic material. So I decided to scrap this and reconsidered what is my goal for this case study and which story am I trying to tell. And that can be really difficult because I think when you're working on something that you're really excited about and you see a really big impact, there are so many different intersecting things that maybe have contributed to that positive impact. And it can, when you're writing a case study, you can get sidelined because there might be 3 case studies that you can write out of this one story. So thinking about what is the purpose of this case study, who am I trying to reach and what am I trying to say? And our key goal here was to show that students felt like they belonged in the classroom because it's a transition unit with first year students. And we wanted them to feel connected. So I scratched that. And then I changed it to this. So rethinking a little bit, I thought, drawing on the expertise of the unit coordinators who had taught the unit before and data drawn from across our first year units, we reconsidered that belonging was a key, that belonging was a key challenge to success at university. Drawing on this research, we changed the model of learning in 3 significant ways. So I've got a really clear, and now the technology has died. But basically, we changed it in 3 significant ways where tutors took only one class, tutors were given specific instructions to cultivate relationships with students both in class and out of class time, and we had a peer tutor. So those were the 3 things that I wanted to talk about in this case study. And that's why it was important for me to slightly reconsider what model I was thinking about. Oh, and I think my microphone. Oh, great, thank you. Sorry, I probably bumped something, that was probably me. Yeah, so those were the key things that we were thinking about in our process. What is it that we're trying to draw out in our case study? Yes.
In considering first year students, a lot of students with disability drop out. Was this, that's a consideration in your research project?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of cultivating a sense of belonging is actually cultivating frameworks and connections so that students can ask for what they need. And we actually found, Sarah and I are at the moment looking at the impacts and have just begun the surveying process. And we've seen from both tutors and students reporting that they felt comfortable to ask for what they needed, felt like they were more supported, felt like they could come to their tutors directly and ask them questions, which is, we do have like more formalized pathways to get support, but quite often they're slow. Quite often they don't actually give students what they might need in that day-to-day moment. So it's really important to foster those connections. So in the teaching team, as I said, we observed that fostering a space where students felt like they belonged had significant impact on attendance, peer-to-peer interaction and connection with tutors. And students reported that these changes supported both them as individuals and as learners in their new context of university. And that was the outcome that we were looking for, because again, this is the focus of this case study, was about, does this new method of teaching better foster belonging? So that's a very brief outline of how I might go about drafting a case study, and then I might go and film it, I might go and connect it. And I know Sarah is later in her talk going to show some of these case studies. So if you'd like to see the finished product, there's a few that Sarah might be showcasing. But I wanted to hand it over to you all now to have a go at thinking about a case study in your context that might leverage, that you might like to leverage for systemic change. So the outcome of this for us, it's still in the works, has been very, very positive. There's been more money funneled towards this kind of teaching strategy. And it has been a very positive experience for all of the colleagues that have worked in this very enriching and fulfilling. And they compared that to previous semesters of teaching the same subject. So it's sort of people that are saying this is a marked difference from how I felt last semester, as well as a really overwhelming student feedback as well. So it's sort of like sustainable teaching as well as supporting students. All right. So these are just some of the quick quotes that I pulled out of that student survey. Sorry, I forgot this slide was here. But basically you can see it's really positive. So the tutor classes have been far more intimate, with the ability for staff and students to learn each other's names and to help with exactly what I need. This relation style has made it easier to learn and enable me to learn in ways that support my abilities. I have really enjoyed being in a smaller tutorial group with the same tutor. It has allowed me to form a good relationship and feel comfortable in my environment. A great teacher-student relationship made me feel comfortable and excited to go to uni. I think that's a really big win. Excited? Oh. And through these classes and the support staff, I have felt a better sense of belonging, as they have been able to help me through the nuances of university life. So we can see here, it's expanding beyond the classroom as well. All right, so this is your turn now. And I have this on the printout on the slide as well as in the Google slides. So whichever way works best for you to see this. I know this is a lot of text to look at once. But basically, I wanted to think for 5 minutes, discuss for 20 minutes. I'm just checking what the time is. And pitch for 15 minutes. So we'll see how we go. And if there are any people that are feeling really confident about pitching, let me know, and we can set you up for that in the last part of this workshop today. But in the thinking time, so I said 5 minutes here, but people think in different ways. Some people prefer a quiet time. Some people prefer to discuss. If you're someone that prefers to discuss, please go ahead and do that. If there are other people at your table similarly inclined. So take some time to individually think through and refine your ideas for a useful case study that applies to your specific context. Consider the following questions. What are the key challenges or opportunities in your context? How can a case study highlight these aspects, and what information and examples will be most impactful? So that's the first part of this. Yes, Sam. Okay. All right. So I'll give everybody 5 minutes now, and then when we come to discuss, I'll read that out as well. All right, so 5 minutes. Oh, okay.
Can you speak more about leveraging a case study for systemic change and why we would want to be creating this case study before we start doing the activity?
Yeah, so if at like your institutions, there are a lot of barriers that say, we don't have time to this, we don't have money to do this, and we don't think it'll make a difference, which is the things that we sort of hear. It's too much time, too much money, won't make a significant impact. Having a case study like this that actually speaks to the meaningful, impactful, and sustainable change that this made for both students and the teaching team incentivizes the broader university hierarchy to get behind this kind of change and to say, actually, it is worth putting money behind it because it's going to raise our QS rankings by 2 points. Yay! Which is what a lot of branding kind of goes behind celebrating. So it speaks to some of the pain points that we have in our university context, which is that people are feeling like they're unseen and don't belong at university, and therefore are having a poor educational experience regardless of their marks. So having a case study that speaks to directly changing, impacting, and supporting the teaching and learning experience on both sides is a great opportunity to speak to people that maybe aren't in the classroom and are looking at teaching and learning environments from a different perspective as well. So has collegial impact, it has systemic impact if we're thinking upwards, and it also has fantastic trickle-down effects too. All right, let's have that 5 minutes now for thinking. Sorry to interrupt. I just realized it is well past 5 minutes, so I hope you're all into the discursive session where you're thinking about sharing your initial ideas, discussing the challenges and opportunities each of you have identified, providing feedback and suggestions and help for each other on improving your case study ideas, and working together to refine your concepts and develop a more detailed outline. So we'll spend maybe another 10 minutes on doing that, and then we'll see how everybody's going. I've got to check how we're going for time, but hopefully we have another 10 minutes. All right, everybody, sorry to interrupt your conversations. I was just looking to see if anyone would like to take me up on the option to pitch. So you don't have to come out the front if you don't want to. You might like to just share a few ideas or things that you're thinking about. But if you would like to come out the front, that would also be welcome. So I already have a hand up. Is this for ideas or you want to come out the front? Oh, fantastic.
All right. So we had the case study of educating plumbers to build their capacity as educators, and this is one that I've done before. So the challenges were they were assumptions about what they want to learn. They were fossilised. There was a culture of negativity in the whole department, and a number of them had specific learning disorders such as dyslexia. So the opportunities was to rebrand, to talk to colleagues, connect first and content second, and building relationships. So I had lots of cups of teas, and building the capacity of educators and to improve the student experience, so the KPIs. What we did was to share classrooms as opposed to classroom observation. Like, that sounds so punitive. And we actually used the Ron Richard ladder of feedback, because that's a very, very insightful and it's very respectful feedback. We had the legal requirements of inclusion because, you know, you've got to do it. And we had the increased feeling of belonging that, again, and Sam said less emails. You'll get less emails because they'll ask each other, and creating inclusive spaces. And we partnered with them like, so it's sort of power with rather than power over the educators, and we coach them. So, and we had 4 sessions, and then they invited them. We invited them to come. So who was there was, you know, a good thing. And then they rolled it out because they spoke to other educators. So we structured learning. We said how to structure sessions. So we talked about learning outcomes, success criteria. We do, you do, we do, I do. Review, formative feedback, and we talked a lot about PowerPoints. What's a good PowerPoint? It's like the white is glaring. So we looked at grey and font 32, a picture, and extra time in assessments. Steve added that one in. And then, and I didn't say this to the group, we had student voice. So what did you enjoy? What did you find challenging? Any suggestions for me? And is there something you'd like to tell me? So that's it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for jumping up so quickly. Great. Did anyone have any questions or feedback? Oh, 5 minutes left. Any questions or feedback for Karen? Sorry, was it Karen? Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's fantastic. So many opportunities. And it kind of also speaks to like what I was talking about too, the connection and belonging and understanding, all of those things really being emphasized. So I wonder if anyone else has anything they'd like to share in the last 5 minutes or so. Oh, we've got one.
I think that idea of creating a community, using the case study to contribute to that, creating a community, which kind of mirrors what we are using these case studies for too, just so that we can get some traction and extend that community wider and wider gradually. It sounds like that's exactly what you're doing too. That's it. Yes.
Yes, you've got to go slow to go fast is what Karen just mentioned. Any other thoughts? Oh, yes, Kimberly.
Not a thought, just a question for Karen. What was I think it was in the context you were saying about the classroom sharing, not the observation, but the sharing. What was the tool you said was really respectful feedback?
The ladder of feedback by
Feedback.
Harvard University.
Oh, ladder. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ron Richard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else from anyone? Either for Karen or anything they'd like to share that they think would be really great for everybody to hear? All right. Well, in that case, we'll finish up there a few minutes early so that our next workshop can start setting up. Thank you, everybody. I hope this was useful.